Good morning to everybody here and to those of you who are out in the virtual audience. I'm really excited about the fact that Extension is back on the forefront, having spent most of my career as an Extension person. And I really credit no other than Dr. Norman Borlaug for this, who for the last probably 10 years before he died, talked about taking it to the farmer. He recognized the poor state of affairs in Extension around the world and how it had, particularly government systems, had deteriorated. And of course it has been backfilled by many players. And this is what presents a challenge with us in Extension as we go forward, because we will be working with the multiplicity of players that there are out there and trying to figure out what the best way to put this together is. So what I'd like to do to begin with here is just talk a little bit about what we've done in the WLI as a platform to work on Extension, and it's really quite a small effort at this point, and then tell you how we plan and hope to partner with MEAS, and then I'll give you just a little bit about the recent scoping mission we had in Egypt to give you a sense of what some of these Extension programs or Extension systems look like out there. So you heard Scott earlier talk about IAER. This was the Iraqi Agricultural Extension Revitalization Program. It was independent of WLI, but I think it illustrates the fact that partnerships are important in this, and that fortunately for the WLI, at least three of the players, the university players involved in this, are overlaps. Utah State, Texas A&M, and UC Davis were all involved in that. We're also involved in WLI. So, but what I have to say about the Iraqi program, it was clearly a difficult place to work. We started working outside of Iraq, actually as we speak here, there's a program in Erbil right now in which the universities are doing some training. But this program was more about technology training than it was about institutional building. And I think MES is really centered around the idea that you've got to have the institutional support if you want sustainability in an extension system. Not to say that, that MEAS isn't going to be involved with technology, it is, but I think we made great progress in technical training, but we were really not emphasizing in IAER so much on the institutional building side for a number of reasons. The benchmark sites have been talked about a lot here so far in WLI, and I consider those to be kind of pilot projects in a way. I mean, we can't do with the finances we have what really needs to be done in these countries to help with their extension programs, but I think the pilot, I think we could do a lot if we had the finances, and that's what we're hoping for. But I think it gives us an opportunity in these programs to see what the state of affairs are and kind of a microcosm of the benchmark sites. So, for example, the Lebanon training program in the Bekaa will include the Syrians, as was mentioned earlier, and we also have combined this with our student program. So the student that's going to be there from Utah State for the summer and the one from UC Davis will be able to follow the action plans, help with what comes out of the extension training in terms of how you implement an extension program. But as I said, it's going to be a relatively small program compared to what I would hope we could do. And so moving on to Egypt, we had the scoping mission in Egypt, and this is really to set the stage, hopefully, for a larger cache of funding that we can use to really make a strong effort there. And there is a scoping mission, I say possible, but I think it's pretty definite now, Scott, that there will be a scoping mission in Jordan. The Jordan USAID mission is interested in having us do this. You've also heard about the issues we have with the Arab Spring and where we can work and where we can send students. It's to our good fortune that in each one of these cases around the benchmark site that there is one of the countries that we can work in each of these ecosystems, which is the reason we're working in Lebanon and bringing the Syrians there. We will follow probably working in Egypt, bring the Iraqis and the Yemenis there, and in Jordan we can bring the West Bank Gaza folks to Jordan. So we plan on doing a series of what I would call these micro-extension training workshops over the next couple of years. So just a word about MEAS. This is Modernizing Extension Advisory Services. It's led by Dr. Bert Swanson at University of Illinois. It is a Leader with Associate Awards, and that's where we are trying to get leverage with USAID to fund these at a level that will help us do bigger things. And these are the partners, which include U.S. universities as well as a number of NGOs like Catholic Relief Service, Global Partners, I think it is, or Cultural Partners, and Winrock. And so it's this group, again, that overlaps with WLI and makes this partnership possible. So let me just say quickly to wrap it up about our scoping mission in Egypt. It's very clear that there are multiple partners who are providing information to farmers. I have put these more or less in the order of importance, actually, in terms of providing technical information, although one could argue this point, I guess. But the best technical information probably comes from the private sector. But the issue is that it's very narrowly focused around the products that they want to purchase or the products they want to sell. And I think farmers everywhere are, even though the private sector is certainly trustworthy, farmers would like to have that independent third-party information. So the private sector is doing good work in providing information, but it needs to go along with the other players. The thing that we were really impressed with were the farmer associations that have survived and appear to be sustainable. And the interesting thing that we found, and maybe not surprisingly, is that the best farmer associations were much wider, much broader than agriculture in itself. They had other things going on in their community, which were part of these associations. So, for example, on the bottom left, or your bottom right, you can see a school where the association was doing education for children in the community, but they were also doing a whole lot in agriculture, and they had a lot of community buy-in as a result. The NGOs are largely supported by donors. CARE is a good example of this. They had a project for a long time building on these farmer associations. And of course, those that survived, of which are about 35 out of 100 and something, are doing all right. But the question is when the funds disappear, what happens? And so certainly credit goes out to the NGOs who are working there, but I don't think that in the long term it would build a sustainable system by itself. And the universities did very little in farmer outreach, but they did do some training for NGOs, and I think there's a role, certainly a role, that the universities can play in extension education, particularly in strengthening their curriculum. And the government system, I think, was, with a few exceptions, the least viable information provider. And in Egypt, I think there's something like 7,000 extension people. They have very little support, and so there needs to be a revamping of that component for sure of the extension advisory services in Egypt. And of course, I don't think that this is surprising. I think we would find this, I know we would find this in a lot of places. So the way forward, we think in extension, is to strengthen the farmer associations. We're thinking about improving information delivery through IT, and if you ask the farmers about their access to computers, it was about 20%, although the good farmer associations were higher than that. And if you asked them what they had in the home, they would tell you, well, those that had young kids certainly had even more access. If you asked them about their cell phones, it was about 1.2 per farmer on average. So they certainly all have cell phones. Create a network of certified advisors. This is a little bit more complicated, but the idea would be for something that had a continuing education component so that those people who get trained more or less in a one-off with a degree program can have a situation where they can have lifelong learning, which is one of the big problems with some of the degree programs and the lack of continuing education. And then, as I said earlier, improve the extension curriculum in the universities to support these kinds of programs. So in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to say about extension, and I thank you for your attention.